Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com, and this is Disconnect to Connect One Word Conversations. I noticed something recently after watching a couple shows, and particularly on Saturday, is that I have a Saturday outfit, and and this is what it is. I have my Good Life Project, hoodie on and in a t-shirt, and I'm ready to start my day, and it's just kind of funny. That's what I do. It kind of gets me through, and so being on video, every day, and especially on Saturday now, I'm starting to notice that. The About a year ago, I started the process of minimizing my clothes, and kind of like, okay, I want to go down to a bare minimum, and kind of do that. And it was fine when I barely, got out because I work from home. And so when people, I would have my networking outfit and everything like that. So people would see something like once a month or something, or every once in a while. But now, that I'm on video or live, it's like in my head, it's like, oh my God, I have the same thing on, right? It's just like, and just let that go. So I am so excited about today's show. How I pick out the words is that a word will come to mind, and I'll just write it down in my Trello. They're not paying me for anything, so Trello is a device for me to keep my projects and things together. I also have Evernote, but how Evernote occurs to me is where my notes go to die. So I am, they last forever there. But so the more that I can kind of relate to them a little better, I will use that too. But I use Trello, and so I look at the the photos of the people that are going to be on the show, and whatever word pops up when I see their smiling face, I put it by their name, and hopefully they want to play along. And so when this word popped up for me within this conversation, remember, I was excited, but then I was kind of concerned because this is my word for the year. So this is a word that I am unpacking for myself for the whole year. And so now I get to have this conversation with my friend, and we'll kind of see not just how it's showing up for me, but how it's showing up for her. So as I do, I invite my friend to come along within the conversation. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. This is the time where I invite my guests or my friend. I'm still trying to, I say it's special guests because it is special. But I, I ask you to introduce yourself however it feels comfortable to you.
Thank you. I was thinking about this because it's always hard to introduce yourself.
Right.
And I think we spend so much of our time associating ourselves with our work
Right.
when we introduce ourselves. So I thought, who am I actually if I'm going to introduce myself this way? And so first and foremost, I'm a very proud big sister. And I like to tell people, at least pre-pandemic, I was a world traveling foodie. Post-pandemic, I'm a homebound foodie, so I'm still a foodie, but
Right.
yeah, but now at home. I'm a writer, I'm a mindfulness teacher and practitioner. In my day job, I'm a public servant, so I serve as a senior advisor and a leadership and well-being coach within the Refugee Asylum and International Operations Directorate within immigration. So yeah, that's I think in a nutshell how I can introduce myself. I
Okay.
also, sorry, one other thing I'll just say is I launched a platform called Roots in the Clouds a while ago, and really with the idea of supporting the humanitarian sector through mindfulness and helping them build resilience and try to mitigate burnout and trauma in the work that they're
Wow.
doing. So,
No, that's definitely exciting, and I'm sure that it'll come up within our conversation, or we'll find a place for all those things to come up, because
yeah.
that is something that I enjoy myself, and really and kind of leaning into. So when we look at the word remember, how does it occur for you?
Well, first of all, it was really interesting to hear you talk about how you picked the word. That was actually going to be a question I was going to ask you. Um, yeah, it was interesting. When I got the word, I just sat with it and then I ended up looking it up. And what I found really interesting was that remember actually directs relate completely, I mean, directly to mindfulness. And so, re being again, and then it has like a Latin root. So it's like memoriare, I think is the Latin word, which literally translates to be mindful. And so it's to bring something back to mind. And so
Wow.
I thought, oh, well, this is actually really fitting because of the work that I
Who
do.
knew,
Who knew?
right?
Yeah. So yeah, so I actually am really excited about this. Yeah, so it's to keep in mind or to be mindful.
It is really when I kind of fought it for a couple of days. Usually, I'm like right at the beginning of the year. It's like I'm announcing this is my word and everything like that. And it took me about 5 days or so for me to just kind of own it and say, this is what I'm going to do. This is the word that I'm going to use. And how I've framed it is I am remembering myself. I am putting myself back together.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things about myself in my self discovery journey that I have hidden or kind of dismissed. And I think to really show up fully and take the stand for my whole and complete life, I have to put things back together.
Yeah.
And so that's how it's been showing up for me, and all these nice little surprises about myself, right? that it's like, oh, okay, where have you been, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just kind of go from there. So that's how it's been landing for me. Are there things that, I mean, I know how you've put that it's mindfulness, and it's kind of just bringing things to mind. Is there things that you feel that you, I don't want to say you don't want to remember, or you just kind of don't want to, I don't want to go there, I'm just done with that, and let's just move forward? Is that how it occurs to you more often too?
Not necessarily more often, but yeah, definitely, right? So I think what has been interesting in thinking about the work this week is I think we spend a lot of our time operating in autopilot, right? So we have like our natural
Yes.
habits. We go through life. We drive from one place to the other. We don't remember the process of getting there. So there's a lot
Right.
of life that's on autopilot. And what I liked about this word as I was thinking about it and learning about it is this idea of intentionality, right? And so to remember is actually one of the most intentional things that we do because you have to actually go through the process of bringing that memory back into the forefront. And
Right.
but I was thinking about this idea of as I was going through it in my own mind, I was like, well, is that actually really true? You have things, like trigger memory is relational. So things like you'll hear a song, for example, or you'll smell something, or you'll taste something, and it'll take you back to a time when you experienced something, whether it was good or bad, that's associated with that. And so that part, I think sometimes like maybe it just shows up, but then the act of staying with it or not staying with it, I think is the intentional piece, right? And so I definitely remember things that are painful.
Right.
And it's easy to kind of shove those further down instead
Right.
of being with them. But I think there's a lot of value to actually being with them and experiencing them if you're in a place where you can learn from them and then heal and move forward. So
Right. No, I definitely appreciate that. And it is, because, last year my word was now, right? So, and getting present, right? And so so I think that's why I thought remember, because it's like, dude, you just got me to now you want me to remember. And so I really appreciate that it is, it's a part of being intentional. It is really saying, I choose to, I make the choice to remember. I am, the decision to this. And I think for myself, that there's a large part of my life that I now recognize was in autopilot. Even though if you would have asked me during that time, I felt like, hey, I'm living my life, right? I'm just, there was this awareness that I was present, in my life, and and now it's like, dude, there was this time, I don't know if you've experienced in commuting to work, before the pandemic and all that other kind of stuff, or if you do commute to work, that there were days that I could remember that I had no knowledge of the drive. It was like, I know I got up, I know I got dressed, and now I'm here. It's like, what happened in between, that
yeah,
time, and it was, there's a part of me that was my life. you know, I know I'm alive, and I know I, that I know I have kids, but I have no idea, I have no reality of all the things that were happening within it, and I really feel like I'm in this case of remembering is just really connecting to those times where I wasn't awake, but I was there. And so I think there are emotional imprints, and there's things that will help me get present to my life. And I don't know. I could be just going down the many rat holes that I go down, or rat
no,
hole or rabbit holes. I don't know. Sometimes you think it's a rabbit hole. I
could be
think it's a
yeah, it
rabbit
could be a
hole,
rat
and then
hole.
it's like, oh, there's a rat down here, right?
No, but I something that you said just really struck me, which is, I'm driving and I know I'm alive, or I wake up, I know I'm alive, and I sometimes wonder, like, do we really know that we're alive though? Because
Right.
what I remember from my commutes in the past was, I wouldn't necessarily like pay attention to, the drive, but what I remember is how angry I was at like
Right.
the traffic and the
Right.
slow drivers and I would show up to work every day just like in a really bad mood. And so it took a really like I had to actively decide to change that because I felt like I was missing out on a lot, right? And so the other thing I love about this word is it also ties into one of my favorite words, which is savoring. And so I started kind of looking at, so especially things like commute, like what can I savor about this moment, right? What can I
Wow.
actually be present to? And suddenly, like I actually started noticing like different things as I was driving. Like I would notice like how blue the sky was one day, or I'd notice like amazing cloud patterns, or I think about like, oh, I wonder what those people are talking about in that car. Like I was more present to what was happening, and I was actually being able to be in that moment. And I think that that's so important. Uh, but yeah, so to this point of like being on autopilot and just living our lives, like I think that there is a good reason to make that intentional choice. And then the other part about savoring, though, is, well, with mindfulness, we talk about wanting to be present, to be in the present moment so that you are actually living.
Right.
But savoring is really, it's bringing together my two favorite things, which are mindfulness and gratitude.
Right. Right.
And there's an element of savoring, which is reminiscing. So again, that's going back into the past and reliving moments of joy and happiness. And there's so much research out there that tells us that even having those moments where we go back to actually relive that can induce the same feelings we had in that moment.
Right.
And I think that that's amazing. Like that's an amazing tool that we have in our own hands to, especially if we're in a bad place on a particular day or something, to go back and think about something that really just brought us so much joy and happiness. And
Right.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's the fight that I have with myself around that, and I appreciate and savoring. I thought you were going to talk about your foodie thing again. I was like food, right? The connection with the food, right? That you just savor it, just kind of be that. But the one thing for me that when I find myself, really enjoying the past or just an experience or something, it's like I'm kicking myself and saying, get present. It's find out what's so. This is you're being delusional right now. It is, and I wonder that it's that balance of how you can reminisce and still stay present and move forward, type of thing. It just seems like it's like there's no good and bad in that, but too often it feels like, as I say, that there's a balance for me between being lazy and self-care. It's like there's a struggle here, and I don't know what's happening right now. If I'm really taking care of myself, or I'm just being lazy. So it is that type of thing. That am I really bringing things to my remembrance to cause forward motion or enabling me to be present, or am I just escaping my presence, by staying back, and reminiscing.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And I think just like with everything else, you don't want to get stuck in a place, right?
Right,
So with reminiscing, if you stay in the past all the time, then you are going to miss out on what's happening right now.
right,
And you're going to, and so I think that there is a balance that has to be achieved. And again, I think that's where the intentionality comes in, though, right?
right.
So if you have a moment of, so a perfect example for my sister and I right now is we think about our mom a lot. She passed away almost a year ago, and it was kind of unexpected. And so it took us a while to get to a place where we could actually think about her without just bursting into tears.
Right, yeah,
And now we're getting to a point that where we can actually have moments of reminiscing about something that we did together or something that we experienced together, and feel that sense of connection and love.
right,
um, but you don't want to get stuck there, because then, like, if that's all I'm thinking about, then I'm not having any forward motion. and
right,
and you're absolutely right. Like, we have to keep moving forward. And so being able to kind of tell yourself, or work with yourself, and this is where the mindfulness practices are really helpful, is it is a practice, right? To be able to go back, reminisce, and then come back to the present and keep moving forward.
right. Yeah, I mean, life occurs to me as, a series of choices, and this decisions and everything. And we have a choice in our life, or most of the times, we feel like we don't have a choice, or we have limited choices, or anything. But there is, there is a, I think I mentioned on a show, or sometimes I don't know, when I had these conversation, if I had this conversation online, or if it was somewhere, or maybe a Zoom call, or somewhere, I don't know where it was, but I know I had it, and that's a good thing. I had, there was a conversation, but it was really me getting to a place where, I am okay what not just my choice, the choices that I make and the choices that I don't make, and realize that that's a part of my life. That's a part of creating the life, that I want, and just having that ownership, of that, and how I look at what has happened or what I want to happen in my life will is I don't want to say will dictate, or is kind of has a say in how intentional I'm being. And there was something that a friend of ours, Barb Klein, in, said in the context of self care, of our intentions and what has our attention,
Mhm.
and too often that I realize that what has my attention is getting in the way of my intentions. And the more that I am mindful of that with no judgment, I can just change my attention, right? What has my listening, right? And just move it into more intention, so I can go there. And so being able to remember those times where my intentions were aligned with my attention kind of helps me, and gives me courage
Yeah.
that I can, live an intentional life. And so those are the things that how I use my remembrance to kind of to move myself forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we talk about that with stress also, right? Like managing stress. Like there's a lot of people say like, oh, I wish I didn't have stress in my life. And the reality is like we need some stress, right? Stress is
Hmm.
what
Right.
motivates us, it gets us going. And so all stress isn't bad, but we live in a society right now that's so fast paced and there's so many expectations. And there's I say I say in my workshops all the time that we should all over ourselves, right?
Right.
So like I should
Right.
do this, I should do that, and it's not constructive, right? And
Right.
so one of the things that we think about with stress is like or adversity of any kind. When we're in a place like right now with the pandemic and financial insecurity, and even like a lot of stuff that's happening with Black Lives Matter right now, there's
Right.
like so much anxiety in the air. And I hear from people all the time in the work that I do about, well, how do I deal with the anxiety? How do I deal with the stress? And one of the things I think about is remembering is a really helpful tool, because you can go back to a time where you were faced with some other kind of major adversity in your life.
Hmm.
And obviously you got past it because you're here now and you're doing the things that you're doing. So being able to sometimes even go back to that place to think about like, what intentions did I have then? What steps did I take to deal with what was happening and still come out on the other side of it?
Right.
Um, and sometimes that can help when we're in a place right now where things are really difficult. So being able to go back and remember is really helpful in that instance too.
Yeah, the conversation that I had yesterday, the word was certain, and I think it was yesterday, about getting our toolbox together, and I came present to I need a box because I have all these tools all over the place, right? And when something happens, I'm like looking for my tools. It's like I know I've had this somewhere, right? Because I used it. I remember using it, but so it's like putting them in one place, in a place that you do that it is, so one, I don't know, like I said, if it's my age, you just remember where I put the box, right? Right? It's like I know I have a box, right? But where did I put it?
Yeah.
And it's just so many things, and I think the other way remember occurs to me that I talked about within my year of just bringing myself together, coming together, unifying yourself, integrating your life. Is is that something that it's a noble endeavor, or is that a necessary piece to, you know, the remembering of self?
It's a really good question. I mean, I feel like it is a noble endeavor to an extent, right? To remember the self. I think first of all, most of us have to get to know the self before we can remember it.
Right.
Because well, and maybe part of that getting to know the self is remembering like who we are at our very core. Because I think we spend a lot of time. I love this concept of labels that you talk about. Going back to our introductions, or we spend a lot of time creating labels for ourselves based on what we think um, is going to be acceptable in society, or based on what we think is going to make other people happy, rather than being able to really just tune in and remember who we are at our very core. Like what's
Right.
most fundamentally important to me as this person in this body in this moment. Um, and I think to do that on a regular basis is a noble endeavor. And I think it's really hard
Right.
because there's a
Right.
lot of stuff that's going to pull us out of that. And that makes me sad in a way because,
Right.
and especially the more that I do the work that I'm doing, like I see myself evolving and kind of getting back to that place of who I really am. And it took, much like you are doing the work that you're doing, it's taken me a long time to get here and to be comfortable in my skin. And there are days where I'm still not comfortable and I have
Right.
to keep working at it. But I love that idea of it being a noble endeavor.
Right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, because sometimes it's like, why bother? What's what is this all about? I feel that. I think that the one thing that I found within myself is my sense of curiosity. I felt like, as growing up, that was always something that my curiosity was put into question.
Mm.
Anytime that I would ask, why is this? Why is this happening? What is this happening? All that kind of stuff. It felt like it was always dismissed. And the story that I created out of that is that the things that I was interested in, or the things that I was curious about, didn't matter, or it wasn't important. So I stopped being curious about things, and I stopped being curious about myself. And the journey that I'm on is just being curious about myself, and just, why am I feeling that way? Like you were talking about before, about being comfortable in your own skin. Having those days is, why do I not feel comfortable in my skin today? What is going on? And just be willing to just to sit with that for, however long that I need to. I created the U cards, to kind of create that for myself and to other people. And some days when I get that, you are heard card, and it's like I look, it's like, really? I don't feel heard, right? It's like, I'm not feeling that. And
Yeah.
and just the inquiry of, why is that? Is it because of the unrest? Is it because of, the last time I said something? Is it, and the more that I unpack those stories to make me feel that, then I am hearing myself. So now I am heard. The first person and the last person that needs to hear me is me.
I love that.
Right? And it's like, and if I always look to other people to kind of, I guess, validate my completeness, that's, yeah, I'm done with that, right? That's like
Yeah.
those are the words. It's great to have the support of others. We're part of a great community, and that they show up for for us in many opportunities that come up. But really, me remembering myself, there are times when the big things that come up in my life, I don't need anybody else. You know, I don't. You know, but it's great to have when they go. You know, when they cheer me on and kind of do that. But I have, I am reaching a place where there are some moments in my life and some steps that I need to take that I need to take alone, and I will take alone.
Yeah.
And I needed this year of remembering, to remember to realize that I can take steps.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think, first of all, I think curiosity is one of the most powerful tools in our toolbox. When we think about a lot of like the discussions that are happening right now or need to happen right now, excuse me, with what's happened, like with the Black Lives Matter movement, or my sister and I have been talking a lot about just even like with any person of color and the things that we've encountered. Um, Things get really personal really fast,
Right.
And I think curiosity is what allows us to step back and just examine things and ask questions. And there's no agenda there. It's just genuine. If you're approaching it with genuine curiosity, it's genuinely because you want to understand and you want to find a way to integrate that into yourself.
Right.
And I think that curiosity, you're absolutely right in terms of the work we do on ourselves, because I think, like, again, going back to this idea that we spend so much time like trying to do things to please others, or to fit into a little box that we think that we need to fit into.
Right.
Um, but doing that, like asking those questions of ourselves and remembering again who we are at our core, is really what helps us to um, to find that strength from within. So,
Right.
because the people around us, they love us, they support us, they care for us, but at the end of the day, like, we are with ourselves 100% of the time.
Right. Right.
you
Absolutely.
know and so to be able to rely on ourselves and then use like the other people around us, as extra support, and be that for others as well,
Right.
I think is really important. And I hear a lot of people who say, like, I feel helpless, or I feel like I don't have any control in this situation. And I always ask that question, right? Like, well, what if anything is within your control right now? And to
Right.
me, like, the one thing that's always within our control is how we choose to react or how
Right.
we choose to show up, right? And
Right.
so that's where I think that curiosity can actually be really helpful. But
No, I definitely appreciate that, and like I'm embracing that. You know, as a kid, you know, curiosity killed the cat. You know, you know. But you know, it's what satisfaction brought him back, right? But you just, I don't know the things that we say, right? But I really, I have questioned the my labels conversation. You know, it took me a couple years to kind of just embrace that, and the main reason why is because I believe that, you know, the labels aren't good or bad. I don't believe labels are good or bad, and I try to stress that within the conversation. However, if we hold too tightly to our labels, then they they don't work for us. And I think the box that is created with our labels is that what we make it mean. So if I say that, you know, it's like, what label am I going to trick? It's like all these labels, and I don't want to pick any. Okay, even though I'm embracing that black is not a label, but for me, quote now, my black label, right? My blackness is a label. There is a part of my discussions, or my conversations, that has nothing to do with my black label. And the more that, even though I can separate that, and I can put that aside, I recognize that there are some people who do not agree with that and feel that, you know, every time I open my mouth, it is a black man speaking, you know. And for me, if I really want to embrace the Dr. Seuss, there's no one youer than you, there is a you beyond my label. And if that you-ness is beyond my label, for me, it's not my black label, it's not my male label, it's not my Christian label or independent voting label, or it's none of that. It's not my shy label or introvert label. It's none of that is me. I am my label and I'm not my labels at the same time. And the more that I embrace that or invite people to embrace that, then we can remember ourselves. We can really embrace all the things that we are and all the things that we're not, so we can show up fully for situations and conversations for people who love us and care about us and the things that we love and care about. And too often, our label wants what it wants. And the reason why I have said within the race conversation, and I don't want to have that conversation again because I said I wasn't pretty much, but the reason why I honor and support the Black Lives Matters conversation that we're having, but that it's beyond Black lives. It's beyond that. That is just a conversation that many of that label is having right now. But if we reduce it to that, and that's the only conversation that we're having, it's a trap. Because I believe that other labels will demand attention and will say that they're the answers, say that they're ally or whatever the case may be, and then it will be labels talking to labels instead of people talking to people. And we need people caring for people, not labels. And I'll get off my soapbox because we're talking about remember, right? But every time that comes up, the more that I embrace that about myself, the more that I embrace that there is this childlike curiosity that is inviting me to live beyond and to see people beyond, and to question why. Then I can find the love and the joy in people. I can find people's humanity, and not stop at how a label is showing up right now.
Yeah, it's so beautiful the way that you just phrased that. And I think that, I mean, it is hard, especially when you're the subject of a label that you haven't placed necessarily on yourself.
Right.
Uh, oh gosh, so, see, this is why I have a hard time remembering. Like, I write stuff down.
Right.
No, but what I was going to say is, I think that there's a role for remember here too, though, right?
Right.
Like, I keep thinking about all the other events that have happened in the last few years. You think about Ferguson, different places where things have happened,
Right.
and even forget, like, put aside for the moment issues around Black Lives Matter, but you look at
Right.
like what's happening with immigrants in detention, like all kinds of things, right?
Right.
And going back to this idea of the humanity of it, and like being able to connect to the person that you're talking to, I think is so fundamentally important. But my concern is that if we don't remember, um, I wrote in a Facebook post the other day, like, I'm really grateful that there's so much like energy right now, right? Like, people
Right.
are fired up,
Absolutely.
they want to do stuff, they want to learn, like, that's great. But I feel like we've been here before. Every time
Hmm.
there's some major thing that happens, we get to this place and
Right.
people um, are they're mobilizing, they're putting stuff out on social media. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on, and then maybe like a little, a month or two passes, and then it's quiet again, and we go
Right.
back to the way that things were before. And
Right.
so, for me, like, I think I do feel like this time there's little differences that make me hopeful that there is going to be change. But
Right.
for lasting change, I think we do have to remember, and we have to keep coming back and keep
Right.
remembering where we started, so that we don't forget and that we continue to to show up, to keep learning, to keep having the discussions. Because and that's what I wrote about the other day, was like, I hope that in a month from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, that we're still doing all that we're doing, and that we don't just let it go. Because and that's honestly, like, sometimes that's just the easiest way, is
Right.
to let it go and keep moving forward. But so I think remembering has a role in that too, that and bringing back to that intentionality of making those choices to keep having this discussion.
Right. No, I totally get that, and that has been my biggest challenge with our word is that I do remember. I do remember. This looks the same. This is and I remember what happened after this. I remember what happened after the hashtag. I remember happened after the constant news. I remember all of that. And so for me, I am finding or trying to find the how is this different? How is this different? How is why is this different? And the more that I kind of look and see that, quite honestly, I haven't found my how and why, yet, and so that is something that I'm still looking at. But I want to be able to believe that this is the time, this is that moment where things change, and or I really try to to move from change language to transformation language.
Yeah.
So I want I want things to transform,
Hmm.
that the to the to the point that we realize that there's, with no shame, blame, or judgment, this ends now. We put a marker, the land and the line in the sand, and all those things that we say, but then we go back to sleep, or we go back to what's normal or convenient, or
Autopilot.
whatever, autopilot, because now things are quote unquote better. I've said that we as a society accept the appearance of inclusion and diversity instead of inclusion and diversity. That's two different things.
Two different things.
And the more that we don't just get the appearance of, I'll include civility, but what is civility? This is what we're standing for. This is what we're up
Yeah.
to. And there are so many things that we're remembering, and there's so many things that we're forgetting, that's causing us to have these moments over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so it's something I am hopeful and fearful at the same time, and I'm okay with that. And because I learned from our coach friend Angie Cole, it's okay to be both, right? Embrace them both, and just go with it. But even with that, I am going to move with that hope and fear, to see the transformation, of our country, and of myself and the people around me. And so next year, when I remember this this time, it is reminiscing, and not in,
Yeah.
like, what the hell, right? It's like,
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah. And if I can add one more thing to that,
Okay.
I think there's one other thing that has to happen in through all of this, is practicing self-compassion.
Right.
So I think a lot of people conflate self-compassion with self-care, but when I think about self-compassion, it's really about being able to meet pain and difficulty with kindness. And I think, you know, we have our own inner critic. We're constantly telling ourselves all kinds of things. And so the more that, especially as we're working through all this different kind of adversity right now, the more that we can practice self-compassion
Right.
and treat ourselves with kindness, the easier it's going to be for us to treat others with kindness. And so going back to this idea of relating to other human beings and talking to other human beings, there has to be some kindness there to be able to see who they are.
Right.
Again, beyond their label,
Right.
to really see who they are. And so I think that the compassion and self-compassion piece is just so closely tied to all of that.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
We could talk about this for hours. However, I'm sure we'll remember other things that we need to do for
Yeah,
today, right?
yeah, exactly.
Is there any, that was, self compassion and the framing of self compassion that you framed. I got that, and I hope people got that. Is there anything that you've got from this conversation, or that you want to leave people with, or kind of invite people to be a part of, that you want to do at this time?
No, I just really appreciate this discussion, and I love this idea of uh, remembering who we are at our core. And so using that intentionality to really tap into that as often as possible. So that, we can stand up as our whole selves and be who we actually are. And how, like, can you imagine how amazing the world would be if everyone could stand up that way and be seen
Right.
that way and connect in that way? Like, I just
Right.
think, so that's what I guess I would end with is I'm hopeful for that eventually, but it takes work on each of our parts. It takes responsibility and intentionality that each person has to take to have that happen. So
No, I appreciate that. I see that too. And every time I see it, I try not to dismiss it. It's like, yes, I see it and I want to see it. I will see it again. I mean, I will. I'm not, what do you say, stalking on your Facebook page, but I love your covers, your yearly vision board.
well, thank you.
And that is it's amazing. And I because when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a vision board. And then I went back a year, and I was like, hey, this is this is what she does. And it's
Yeah.
like, and it's incredible. And I think the more that we can see before we see, and that's a great a way to do it. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
I mean, I would love for you to sit in the green room for a moment while I close
Thank
the
you.
show, and so we can end. Um, um, I guess in the way I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just all over the place. but
Thank you.
I never want the conversations to end. That's my
That's the time.
problem.
That's the
But
time to
it's
do
like
conversation. Yeah.
right, but the good thing is the conversation should never end. We all want to stay within the conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. This is definitely been great. I really hope that you got a lot out of that, and you'll continue to get things out of that, and you'll remember this conversation as a conversation that caused you to be curious about yourself, about your life, and how you're showing up. The one thing that I got from not just this conversation, but all of these conversations that I'm having is the importance of staying in conversation. I do this on a daily basis. Not that I'm trying to prove to myself that I can do it. There's like this marathon. Yes, is that I endeavor to have thoughtful conversations daily. And the only way that I can have thoughtful conversations daily is to stay in conversation. And so, if we want compassion in our life, stay in the conversation of compassion. If we want kindness in our life, stay in that conversation. And sometimes there are things that get in the way of that, but fight through it. In one of the conversations that I had about being heard is that there are moments where we just say F it, but too often we leave And what I'm inviting us to do, that even in those moments when we say F it, stay. Stay in the conversation, and you'll see all the love, compassion, and things that you want to have show up in your life. The world wants you, the world needs you, and the world is waiting for you. So go be you. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.